The mansion stood at the edge of a quiet hill, surrounded by tall trees that swayed gently in the wind. Its walls were high and strong, painted in a soft cream color that glowed in the morning sun. It was a place of comfort, of power, and of solitude. Inside, every detail spoke of wealth and careful planning. Expensive paintings hung on the walls. Polished floors reflected the light of chandeliers, and the smell of fresh flowers filled the air. Yet, despite the grandeur, the house had a certain emptiness to it, a silence that made the sound of footsteps echo across the rooms. Among the staff who maintained the mansion, there was one person who moved through the house like a shadow. She was a housekeeper, quiet and unassuming, and no one paid much attention to her. She did not speak loudly or demand attention. She did not seek recognition or praise. Every morning, she arrived before the sun had fully risen, carrying a small bag with cleaning supplies and a notebook tucked neatly under her arm. She wore simple clothes, practical shoes, and her hair was tied back in a neat bun. Her face was calm, her eyes soft, but they held a quiet sharpness that no one noticed at first glance. She knew the mansion better than anyone. Every corner, every door, every hidden passage or loose tile was familiar to her. She could walk through the hallways with her eyes closed, knowing exactly where she was at every step. She dusted the shelves with care, polished the silverware, and arranged the flowers in the vases. She listened to the rhythm of the house, to the subtle sounds that others ignored, the creak of the staircase, the faint hum of the air conditioning, the soft tapping of keys in the study. She noticed everything. But she never spoke unless spoken to. The billionaire who lived in the house was a man of great wealth and great caution. His life was filled with meetings, phone calls, and constant travel. He was used to people surrounding him, yet few he trusted completely. His days were carefully scheduled, and he relied on his staff to maintain the order he demanded. But among all the people who worked in his home, the housekeeper was often overlooked. She was there, always moving quietly, cleaning, observing, and recording in her mind every small detail. Despite being unnoticed, she had a way of seeing things that others did not. While others rushed through their duties, focused only on their tasks, she observed the subtle changes in the mansion, the unusual movements of visitors, the soft whispers that echoed in the hallways. She noticed when a painting had been moved slightly, when a letter was left out of place, when a new face appeared in the mansion for the first time. Nothing escaped her attention, though she never made a scene or drew notice to herself. Her life outside the mansion was simple. She lived in a small apartment in the city, in a neighborhood where people nodded politely but rarely stopped to chat. She did not have a family waiting for her, and her friends were few, but she did not mind. She enjoyed the quiet, the routine, and the ability to observe life without being part of its chaos. She had learned over the years that being unseen had its advantages. She could notice things, understand patterns, and see truths that others missed. One morning, as she began her work, she noticed a small detail that made her pause. A visitor had arrived early, someone she had never seen before. The man walked confidently through the halls, his eyes scanning the surroundings with a keen interest. He spoke briefly with one of the other staff members, leaving a small envelope on the desk before leaving. It was a tiny thing, easily missed, but the housekeeper's instincts told her it was important. She made a mental note, carefully observing who had handled the envelope and where it had been placed. Later that day, she noticed more unusual movements. The billionaire received phone calls that lasted longer than usual. Visitors came and went at odd times, and there was a tension in the air that had not been there before. The housekeeper continued her work quietly, dusting, polishing, arranging, but her mind was alert. She recorded every detail, connecting small pieces that others ignored. The movements of people, the timing of phone calls, the expressions on faces, they all mattered, and she noticed them all. Despite her quiet demeanor, she was not afraid. She had learned to read the signs of danger in everyday life, to notice when something was off, and to trust her instincts. Over the years, she had developed a sharp intuition, honed by years of careful observation. She knew that even the smallest detail could reveal a truth that no one else could see. And in a house filled with wealth and secrecy, where everyone was busy with their own tasks, Her attention to detail was a hidden strength. She continued her work, moving silently through the mansion, never speaking more than necessary. She noticed the way the billionaire's assistant lingered too long near his office, the way a delivery man seemed unusually nervous, and the way the wind shifted outside the windows, carrying sounds that others did not hear. She wrote notes in her mind, cataloging every observation, every small irregularity. She understood that in a world of power and wealth, knowledge was protection, and attention to detail could be the difference between safety and disaster. The housekeeper's routine was unchanging, but the mansion itself was never quiet. There were always movements, sounds, and signals that only someone who truly observed could notice. And she did. She watched without judgment, recorded without bias, and moved without detection. To the billionaire and the other staff, she was invisible, a background presence in the grand house. But in truth, she was the quiet guardian of the mansion, aware of every detail, understanding the subtleties that others ignored. Her life was simple, yet it was filled with purpose. She took pride in her work, in the order she maintained, and in the careful attention she gave to the world around her. She did not seek recognition, and she did not expect thanks. She understood that being quiet and observant was more powerful than being loud and noticed. And in a house filled with wealth, secrets, and potential danger, her vigilance was a shield that no one knew existed. As the day came to an end, the housekeeper moved through the mansion one last time. She checked each room, ensuring everything was in place, that nothing was out of order. She paused at the study, noticing the envelope still on the desk. She made a mental note of its presence, of the timing, and of the visitor who had left it. Everything mattered. Everything was connected, and she understood that one day, all these small details could become crucial. She left the mansion quietly, her footsteps soft on the driveway. The sun had set, casting long shadows across the walls. The world outside was bustling, full of noise and distraction, but she carried the silence of the mansion with her. She knew that tomorrow would bring more observations, more details, and perhaps more signs of danger. And she would be ready, as she always had been, to notice what no one else saw. The next morning, the housekeeper arrived at the mansion just as the first light of dawn touched the windows. The air was cool, and a quiet fog hung over the garden, making everything look soft and muted. She moved through the halls as usual, her footsteps barely making a sound on the polished floors. She carried her cleaning supplies, but her mind was not on the dust or the flowers. It was on the envelope she had noticed the day before. Something about it did not feel right, and she knew that it might be important as she went about her usual work. She kept her eyes open for unusual patterns or behaviors. She noticed the way the butler seemed distracted, glancing nervously at the study whenever he passed by. She saw that the assistant was unusually attentive to small details, but in a way that seemed forced. There was a tension in the house, subtle but unmistakable, and she felt it in the air. Her instincts, honed over years of observing the world without being seen, told her that something was not right. The billionaire arrived soon after, moving quickly through the house, checking his phone and speaking briefly to the staff. He seemed distracted, and the housekeeper noticed it immediately. His usual calm and controlled demeanor had changed. He was more tense, more aware of small things that usually went unnoticed. She understood that he might already sense some threat, but she also knew that he could not see the full picture yet. Her role, though quiet, might be essential in revealing what no one else noticed. Throughout the day, visitors came and went. One of them was a businessman the billionaire had never met before. He carried himself with confidence, speaking with an ease that seemed rehearsed. He asked questions that seemed casual, but had a subtle intensity, as if he were testing the environment. The housekeeper observed him from a distance, noting the way he handled objects, the timing of his gestures, and the small pauses in his conversation. To most, these details would have been meaningless, but she recorded them in her mind, understanding that they could form a pattern later. As the day passed, more signs of irregularity became visible. Packages arrived without prior notice. Some letters were misplaced or altered in ways that seemed minor, but were unusual for a household with strict routines. The housekeeper noticed these details and began piecing together what might be happening. She did not speak out immediately. Her approach was always careful, quiet, and deliberate. She had learned that rushing could create confusion and alarm, while careful observation often revealed the truth more clearly. In the afternoon, she had a brief interaction with one of the visitors. It was a casual conversation, but she noticed subtle clues in the words and gestures of the person. A hidden tension, a hesitation, a glance that lingered too long. These were small signals that most would miss, but she recognized them. She wrote mental notes, cataloging every detail, knowing that even minor things could become significant in understanding the bigger picture, while continuing her work. She also paid attention to the routines of the billionaire and the staff. She saw how each movement, each decision, each small action could influence the flow of events in the mansion. She noticed when someone lingered too long near the office, when a phone call lasted longer than usual, and when subtle changes in behavior occurred. Her observations were like threads in a web, and she began weaving them together in her mind to create a clearer picture of what might be happening. The housekeeper also observed the body. Assessor Sensel, Simsel, SY was Senesel, and Sensel, SSL, SLS, and Selen, SS, and Selen, Sel, and in Bless, and SS, and Self, Sevelum, Success, and Sel, Sel, and Success, System, Success. He moved quickly, but there were moments when he paused, glanced over his shoulder, or frowned slightly. She recognized these as signs of concern or distraction. She understood that he might be sensing something unusual, but did not yet have all the information. Her careful observation could provide him with clarity that no one else could offer. As evening approached, the housekeeper noticed another detail that seemed out of place. A small item had been moved from its usual spot, and a visitor had left behind a note that was partially hidden. She picked up the note quietly, examining it closely. The handwriting was unfamiliar, and the content hinted at plans or intentions that were unclear. She did not immediately bring it to the billionaire. Understanding that she needed to connect the dots further before revealing her observations, she continued her quiet work, cleaning and organizing, all the while analyzing the patterns she had noticed. The day had provided her with enough information to understand that there was a potential threat, though the exact nature of it was not yet clear. Her mind worked like a puzzle, fitting pieces together, and she felt a growing sense of urgency. The mansion, though calm on the surface, was hiding complexities that required careful attention. During the night, she reviewed everything she had observed in her mind. She replayed conversations, gestures, and unusual movements, analyzing them from different angles. She thought about the billionaire, about the visitors, and about the staff. She understood that the details she had recorded could reveal important truths if connected properly. She knew that her role as a quiet observer was critical, and that her careful attention could prevent serious problems. The housekeeper's dedication to observing without being noticed gave her a unique perspective. While others focused on their tasks, she focused on the subtle signs of change, the irregularities that most ignored. She understood that danger often arrived in small, almost invisible ways. She had the ability to see it before it became apparent to others. Her quiet vigilance was a form of protection for the mansion and its occupant. By the end of the second day, she had gathered enough evidence to sense that there was a deliberate plan unfolding. She noticed how the timing of visits, the handling of documents, and the behavior of certain individuals created a pattern that could not be coincidental. Her instincts, backed by careful observation, told her that action might soon be necessary. She was ready to provide her insights when the moment came. Knowing that her attention to detail was invaluable, she moved through the mansion one last time that evening, checking the rooms, the study, and the common areas. Everything seemed orderly, yet she could sense the underlying tension. Her eyes caught every small anomaly, and she committed each one to memory. She understood that knowledge was power. Her knowledge could make the difference between safety and danger for the billionaire. As she left the mansion, she felt the weight of responsibility quietly settle on her shoulders. She walked back to her apartment in silence, reflecting on the events of the day. The signs were there, subtle but clear to someone who paid attention. She knew that the coming days could bring more challenges and that her vigilance would be essential. She also knew that the billionaire, busy with his business and his life, would not notice the details she had seen. That was why her quiet attention mattered so much. Her thoughts lingered on the patterns she had observed. Each movement, each gesture, each hidden signal was a piece of a larger puzzle. She had learned over time that patience and observation were more powerful than rushing or acting impulsively. By remaining silent and attentive, she could see what others could not. She could understand the hidden currents of behavior and intentions in a way that no one else could. The housekeeper prepared herself for the next day, knowing that her role was far from over. There were more visitors expected, more movements to observe, and more details to record. Her dedication to watching, listening, and understanding would continue. She understood that her work was not about recognition or praise, but about awareness and preparedness. And in the world she observed, awareness could be the key to safety. She went to bed with a sense of calm determination. The mansion was quiet, the billionaire asleep in his study, and the staff resting after a long day. Yet she remained aware, her mind replaying the details of the day, noting the small irregularities, and preparing for what might come next. Her quiet vigilance was her strength, and she knew that it could become crucial in the days ahead. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the mansion, casting long shadows across the polished floors. The housekeeper arrived as usual, carrying her cleaning supplies and her quiet determination. She had spent the night thinking about the patterns she had noticed in the past 2 days. Every detail, every gesture, every unusual sound was carefully stored in her memory. She understood that the situation was becoming more serious, that her observations could soon be crucial as she moved through the grand halls. She noticed small changes that others might not have seen. The butler seemed more nervous than before, glancing repeatedly at the study as if expecting something to happen. The assistant's movements were precise but forced, almost mechanical, and the way visitors were being received felt rehearsed. Each detail, though minor on its own, added to a growing sense of unease. The housekeeper knew that patterns were important. She began to connect the threads that others overlooked. A visitor arrived that morning who was unfamiliar to the housekeeper. He carried a briefcase and walked with a confidence that suggested he was used to being in control. The billionaire welcomed him politely, but with caution. As the visitor spoke, the housekeeper observed the subtle movements, how his eyes shifted when he glanced at certain items in the room, how his hands fidgeted when he touched documents, and the slight hesitation before he answered questions. To most, these would have seemed like ordinary behavior, but she recognized them as indicators that something was off. While performing her duties, the housekeeper also noticed small signs that the mansion's security had been subtly compromised. A lock on a side door appeared slightly misaligned, and a window that was usually tightly secured had been left slightly open. She did not make a scene, but she made a mental note of these details. She understood that even small breaches could be dangerous if left unnoticed. Throughout the day, she continued to watch and listen quietly. She noticed how the billionaire's schedule was subtly altered, with meetings shifted and calls delayed. These changes were minor, but to someone who observed as closely as she did, they were significant. She began to suspect that someone was trying to influence his routine, perhaps to create an opportunity for a larger plan. Her mind worked carefully, piecing together the puzzle that was forming before her eyes. As afternoon approached, she spotted another unusual detail. A delivery arrived that was not scheduled, containing a package that seemed innocuous but was addressed incorrectly. The staff handling it appeared unaware of the discrepancy. The housekeeper examined the package discreetly, noticing the faint marks on the wrapping and the unusual weight distribution. These were signs that could easily be missed, but she understood that they could indicate tampering. She stored the observation in her mind, preparing to report it if necessary. She also continued to monitor the interactions between the billionaire and his visitors. There were subtle exchanges, slight pauses, and glances that conveyed more than words. She understood the unspoken language of people who were hiding intentions. Each small movement, each hesitation, each repeated gesture became part of the story she was quietly assembling. Her observations were forming a clear picture, though she had not yet shared it with anyone. The housekeeper's attention extended to the smallest details of the mansion itself. She noticed how the curtains had been adjusted differently in the study, how certain books were moved slightly on the shelves, and how a painting appeared to have been shifted. These were minor details, but they suggested that someone had been inside rooms without permission. She knew that these signs could not be ignored. Her careful eyes and patience allowed her to notice things that others would have dismissed as trivial. During the evening, a subtle but important discovery occurred. While arranging items in the library, she noticed a small slip of paper partially hidden between the pages of a book. It contained a few words written hastily, hinting at plans that were not yet clear. She carefully memorized the content, understanding that it could be a key piece of information. She did not show it to anyone immediately, knowing that timing and context were important when revealing observations. Her mind worked like a careful detective, and knowing else seemed to see. Each visitor, each staff member, each minor disruption was part of a larger narrative. She began to see patterns that could indicate a planned action against the billionaire. Her intuition, combined with careful observation, told her that the situation was becoming urgent. She knew that sharing her findings too soon could create panic. But waiting too long could be dangerous. The billionaire remained, unaware of the growing picture that the housekeeper had begun to assemble. He was preoccupied with calls, meetings, and decisions that demanded his attention. The staff continued their routines, largely oblivious to the subtle irregularities. Only the housekeeper noticed the connections, small signs that suggested a threat, and the hints that pointed to betrayal or harm. Her role as an invisible observer had become critical. As night fell, she moved through the mansion with her usual careful attention. She checked every room, every corner, every potential point of entry. She noted the minor changes that had occurred throughout the day and considered what they could mean. She understood that danger often arrived quietly, hidden in ordinary moments. Her vigilance was her strength. It was essential in protecting the billionaire and the mansion. Before leaving for the evening, she reviewed everything she had observed mentally. She considered the visitors, the staff, the changes in routine, and the unusual details. Each piece of information was carefully stored in her mind, ready to be shared when the moment was right. She understood that revealing the information too early could cause unnecessary alarm. But withholding it too long could be risky. Timing, she knew, was everything. As she walked to her small apartment that night, quiet streets felt safe compared to the mansion she left behind. Yet her mind was alert, replaying the day's events, analyzing patterns, and connecting details. She thought about the visitors, the unexpected deliveries, the unusual gestures, and the minor irregularities in the house. Each observation was a thread in a web that she was quietly weaving. She knew that her work required patience, attention, and discretion. The billionaire, busy with his world of business and meetings, would not see the signs she had noticed. The staff, focused on their tasks, would not connect the dots. Only her quiet vigilance allowed her to understand the unfolding situation. She carried the responsibility of seeing what others could not, understanding that her observations could make a critical difference in the days ahead. Throughout the night, she mentally rehearsed her observations. She considered the best way to connect the dots, the order in which to present her findings, and the potential outcomes of revealing the information. She was calm, focused, and prepared. Her patience and careful attention had brought her to a point where she could understand the situation better than anyone else. And she knew that her next steps would be crucial. The housekeeper went to bed with a quiet sense of purpose. She had witnessed unusual movements, subtle irregularities, and potential threats. She had collected evidence, noticed patterns, and connected details that others had overlooked. Her observations had formed a growing picture, and she was prepared to act when the time was right. The mansion, though seemingly calm, held secrets that only she could perceive, and she was ready to reveal them when necessary to protect the billionaire and his home. The next morning, the housekeeper arrived at the mansion with the same quiet resolve that had carried her through the previous days. The mansion looked calm, almost peaceful, bathed in the soft glow of the early sun. Yet she knew that beneath the surface, subtle movements were taking place, gestures, glances, and actions that could hint at danger if one knew how to see them. She moved through the hallways as usual, dusting, polishing, and arranging, but her mind was alert, following the invisible threads she had been tracing for days as she passed the study. She noticed a new envelope resting on the desk. It looked ordinary, yet something about it felt wrong. She observed the way the billionaire's assistant handled it, the careful but hesitant movements, and the small glance toward the windows as if checking for witnesses. Her instincts told her that this was not a simple piece of correspondence. She memorized every detail: the handwriting, the weight, and the position it had been left in, understanding that these small signs could reveal more than any spoken words. Throughout the morning, she continued her silent watch. Visitors came and went, each one revealing small clues through body language, tone, and timing. She noticed the subtle changes in their expressions when certain topics were discussed. Some appeared nervous, some overconfident, and some seemed to be hiding knowledge they were not meant to have. She recorded these behaviors mentally, adding each observation to the growing puzzle. She had been assembling for days. She also observed the billionaire more closely than before. He was busy with meetings and phone calls, yet there were small signs of unease in his movements. He would pause mid-step, glance at the hallways, or adjust papers on his desk with more tension than usual. The housekeeper noticed these details, understanding that they indicated awareness of something amiss, even if he did not yet know the full extent of the threat. In the afternoon, she discovered another small but significant clue. While tidying the library, she noticed that a book was out of place, its spine slightly worn from being handled repeatedly. Inside, she found a folded piece of paper partially hidden among the pages. The message was cryptic, written in a hurried hand, hinting at intentions she could not yet fully decipher. She committed it to memory, carefully considering how it might fit with the other observations she had made over the past days. Her methodical observation extended beyond people to the mansion itself. She noticed slight changes in how furniture was arranged, subtle marks on the floors, and the positioning of objects that seemed deliberately altered. These were minor details, but to someone with her experience, they suggested that someone had been inside rooms without permission. Each small anomaly added to her understanding of the situation, and she began forming a clearer picture of a potential plan that could threaten the billionaire throughout the day. The housekeeper carefully tracked interactions between staff and visitors. She noticed when someone lingered unusually near the office, the timing of phone calls, and even the way emails were handled. Every small detail became significant when pieced together with others. She could sense patterns forming, a sequence of events that were not random. She understood that she had to remain silent but ready, waiting for the right moment to reveal her findings. Even as she worked quietly, she kept an eye on the mansion's surroundings. She noticed the way cars arrived and departed, the timing of deliveries, and the behavior of people outside the gates. These were subtle signals that could indicate intentions beyond ordinary visits. She connected them with the unusual activity inside the house, creating a mental map of potential risks that no one else could see. Her mind moved like a detective, analyzing every fragment of information with patience and precision. By evening, she had gathered a critical set of observations. Patterns that had seemed isolated now formed a coherent sequence. Visitors who had no reason to be there, movements that defied normal routines, and subtle disruptions in the staff's usual workflow. She realized that these elements could indicate a planned threat, one that might put the billionaire at risk. Her instincts told her that the time for careful observation was nearing an end, and that action would soon be necessary. As night approached, she moved through the mansion one last time, reviewing her mental notes. She retraced the steps of visitors, remembered the timing of phone calls, and considered the placement of objects. She reviewed the messages she had discovered, piecing together hints that suggested a larger plan. Her mind worked tirelessly, combining the small clues into a clear understanding of the situation. She knew that the information she held was critical, and that revealing it at the right moment could prevent disaster. While the billionaire rested in his study, unaware of the depth of her observations, the housekeeper reflected on her role. She understood that she had the ability to see what others could not. Her quiet vigilance, patience, and careful attention had revealed a pattern of behavior that might have gone unnoticed until it was too late. She had collected evidence without confrontation, understood the intentions of visitors, and recognized subtle changes that hinted at danger. Her observations had made her a silent guardian, the unseen protector of the mansion and its occupant. She knew that revealing her findings would require tact and clarity. The billionaire was focused on his work, accustomed to handling matters of business and security in his own way. Her approach had to be precise, presenting the observations without panic, connecting the dots in a way that could be understood immediately. She prepared mentally, considering the sequence in which she would share the information, the details that would be most crucial, before leaving for the night. She ensured that every corner of the mansion was in order. She moved quietly through the halls, checking doors, windows, and rooms. She confirmed that nothing was out of place, yet she remained aware of the subtle changes she had noted throughout the day. Each observation added to the growing picture of a potential threat, and she was ready to act when the moment came. As she walked back to her small apartment, the quiet streets seemed peaceful, yet her mind remained alert. She reflected on the day's observations, considering how each small detail could impact the situation. The visitors, the staff, the altered routines, and the hidden messages all formed a complex puzzle. She had the pieces, and she knew that arranging them correctly would be crucial in revealing the truth. The housekeeper went to bed with a sense of quiet determination. She had observed, analyzed, and connected details that no one else had noticed. She understood the importance of timing, the value of patience, and the power of careful observation. Her role was silent but essential. She knew that the next day could bring the moment when she would reveal what she had discovered. The mansion, though calm on the surface, held secrets that only she could perceive, and she was prepared to use her knowledge to protect the billionaire and ensure his safety. The morning arrived quietly, with the soft light of dawn spilling into the mansion. The housekeeper entered as usual, carrying her supplies but also carrying the weight of the knowledge she had gathered over the past days. She knew that the moment to act was approaching, and she moved through the hallways with her usual calm and focus. Every step, every glance, every small movement was intentional. She prepared for the day that could change everything. As she worked, she observed the staff and visitors carefully. The patterns she had noticed over the past days had become more evident. The businessman who had arrived earlier continued to linger in ways that seemed calculated. The assistant seemed increasingly nervous, glancing at the billionaire in ways that hinted at secret intentions. Every movement, every pause, every gesture was part of a larger story that the housekeeper had been quietly documenting. She checked the envelopes, notes, and packages she had observed previously. Each one held subtle clues, folds in the paper, marks on the packaging, timing of delivery that suggested more than a simple message. Her careful attention allowed her to see connections that no one else could. She pieced together the sequence of events, understanding that there was a plan in motion that could threaten the billionaire if not intercepted. During the morning, small confrontation occurred. The assistant approached the study attempting to move a document, but the housekeeper noticed immediately. She followed the movement silently, observing without being detected. The way the assistant hesitated and looked around showed that he knew something was wrong, but he did not yet understand that his actions had been noticed. The housekeeper recorded everything in her mind, knowing that these details could provide crucial evidence. Meanwhile, the billionaire remained busy with calls and meetings, unaware of the quiet drama unfolding around him. He trusted his staff and assumed that the mansion's routines were normal. The housekeeper understood that he needed to see the situation clearly, and it was her responsibility to reveal the truth without causing panic. She planned her approach carefully, deciding the best way to connect the dots and present her findings so that he could understand immediately. In the afternoon, she discovered the final piece of evidence she had been seeking. While organizing the library, she noticed a folder tucked behind a set of books. Inside were documents that revealed the full extent of the plan. They showed financial manipulations, false communications, and evidence of someone intending to exploit the billionaire's absence. Her heart raced slightly, not from fear, but from the urgency of the moment. She now had the confirmation she needed, the complete picture of the potential threat. Understanding the gravity of the situation, she approached the billionaire quietly. She did not announce herself with urgency or drama. Instead, she spoke calmly, explaining her observations step by step. She described the unusual behavior of visitors, subtle irregularities in staff movements, the hidden notes, and the evidence she had collected. Her voice was steady, her tone measured, conveying facts without emotion, but carrying the weight of truth. At first, the billionaire was skeptical. He was used to relying on advisors and assistants, not the quiet housekeeper who had always blended into the background. But as she laid out the patterns, the anomalies, and the documents she had discovered, it became clear that her observations were accurate. Every detail she had noticed over the past days fit together to reveal the hidden plan. Her patience, vigilance, and careful attention had uncovered what no one else had seen. Together, they reviewed the evidence. The billionaire realized that his trust had been misplaced, that someone close to him had been manipulating events for personal gain. Thanks to the housekeeper's silent observation and careful documentation, he was able to understand the full scope of the threat. He could act decisively, preventing harm to his wealth, his reputation, and his personal safety. The plan that had been carefully concealed was now exposed, and the conspirators had no opportunity to execute their intentions. The housekeeper remained calm throughout the process. She did not seek recognition or reward. Her satisfaction came from knowing that her careful observation and quiet dedication had made a difference. The billionaire, though grateful, understood that her work was not for accolades, but for the sake of protection and awareness. She had revealed what no one else could see, providing clarity and safety through patience, insight, and diligence. After the immediate threat was neutralized, the housekeeper continued her work as usual. She moved through the mansion with the same quiet care, dusting, polishing, and arranging. But her presence was now quietly respected. The staff and the billionaire understood that her observations had been invaluable, that her attention to detail had prevented a crisis. Though she remained humble, her actions had left a lasting impact, a silent legacy of vigilance and intelligence. The billionaire began to rely on her insights more subtly. He did not ask for explanations at every moment, but he learned to notice the small details she highlighted. The mansion became safer, not because of alarms or security systems alone, but because of the careful, patient observations of someone who saw what others missed. The housekeeper continued her work quietly, her vigilance unwavering, understanding that her role was to protect and to notice even when no one else did. Days passed, and life in the mansion returned to a semblance of normalcy. Visitors continued to arrive, calls continued to be made, and routines resumed. But the awareness she had brought to the billionaire changed how he interacted with his environment. He became more attentive, more cautious, and more appreciative of the unseen details that could make a difference. And through it all, the housekeeper remained the silent observer. Her presence quiet but essential. The story of her vigilance spread quietly among the staff. They began to notice her attention to detail, the way she observed without judgment, and the care with which she documented irregularities. Though she did not seek recognition, her quiet heroism became known in subtle ways. People began to understand that some of the most important contributions are made not with words or actions that draw attention, but with patience, observation, and intelligence that others overlook. The mansion, once a place of ordinary routines and unnoticed movements, became a space where attention to detail mattered more than ever. The billionaire continued to thrive, protected not only by security measures and advisors, but by someone who could see what others could not. The housekeeper's work had shown that vigilance, patience, quiet intelligence could change outcomes in profound ways. And so, life continued. The housekeeper moved through the mansion each day, maintaining order and cleanliness, but also maintaining the invisible shield that her observations provided. She continued to notice, to connect, and to understand the subtleties of behavior and environment that others overlooked. Her work was quiet, her presence often unnoticed. But her impact was undeniable. The billionaire, safe and aware, never forgot the woman who had revealed what no one else could see. She had saved him not with confrontation or noise, but with patience, care, and attention to detail. She had shown that being quiet and observant could be more powerful than any overt action. And in the mansion, the legacy of her vigilance remained, a testament to the unseen power of careful observation and thoughtful action. The housekeeper remained, as always, quiet, humble, aware her work never done, and her vigilance never ending. The mansion had settled into a new rhythm. Though life had returned to normal on the surface, there was a sense of quiet vigilance that lingered, almost imperceptible but powerful. The billionaire continued with his work, meetings and calls, but he carried himself differently now. He was more attentive, more careful, and more aware of the details around him. He had learned, thanks to the housekeeper, that even the smallest actions could reveal larger truths, and that what was unseen often mattered most. The housekeeper moved through the halls with her usual quiet grace, performing her duties as if nothing had changed. She cleaned, arranged, and polished, but her eyes were always observing. She noticed the way the sunlight hit the floors differently in the morning, the way the staff moved more deliberately, and the subtle sounds that hinted at changes in the mansion's environment. Every detail mattered, and she never allowed anything to escape her attention. One afternoon, a new visitor arrived. This person was a consultant, brought in by the billionaire to review operations and security measures. Unlike others, the consultant's presence carried authority, but the housekeeper observed subtle signs of nervousness. He adjusted his suit repeatedly, glanced at documents with tension, and hesitated before entering certain rooms. To anyone else, he seemed professional and composed, but her experience allowed her to read between the lines. She understood that people often reveal more than they intend, and she was alert to every hint. Throughout the day, she noticed minor irregularities that hinted at ongoing attempts to manipulate or mislead. Emails were slightly altered, schedules were rearranged, and documents were handled in unusual ways. These small signs would be invisible to most, but she cataloged each one, understanding that they could indicate a larger plan. Her mind worked quietly, connecting the dots in a way that no one else could. The mansion was calm, but beneath the surface, the quiet currents of human behavior flowed, and she noticed every ripple. She also paid close attention to the billionaire's responses. He had begun to recognize the subtle cues she had pointed out, and he asked questions that reflected a new awareness. He noticed the consultant's nervous gestures and asked for clarification, observing the answers more closely than ever before. Her previous observations had taught him the value of attention to detail, and he now began to trust his instincts more. The housekeeper's influence, though silent, changed how he perceived the world around him as the day progressed. She discovered a pattern emerging among the staff. Small inconsistencies, previously dismissed as accidental, now appeared intentional. Certain staff members were making repeated errors in specific tasks, while others acted unusually cautious. She understood that these behaviors could be signs of hidden motives, subtle attempts to manipulate outcomes. Her quiet vigilance allowed her to detect patterns that would otherwise remain invisible, and she prepared to use this knowledge if needed. The housekeeper's attention extended to the mansion itself. She noticed the doors, windows, and security systems. Observing the ways in which they were used and occasionally manipulated, she saw small scratches on locks, subtle movements of objects, minute changes in the environment that suggested previous tampering. To an ordinary observer, these details might seem trivial, but she understood their significance. Each irregularity was a thread in a web. She was quietly mapping it with precision. Later that evening, she found a misplaced folder behind the study shelves. Its contents included documents and notes that had been overlooked. She reviewed the materials carefully in her mind, understanding their relevance without alerting anyone. The documents revealed small inconsistencies in financial reporting and minor errors in communications. While individually, these might not have seemed important, together they painted a picture of ongoing attempts to manipulate situations for personal gain. She understood the importance of timing. She knew that her next move would require careful consideration. The billionaire, still focused on his work, was unaware of the full scope of her observations. He trusted his staff, relied on his schedule, and assumed that the mansion's environment was secure. The housekeeper knew that she held knowledge he did not, and she considered the best way to present it. She would need to act discreetly, connecting the details in a clear and calm manner that he could understand immediately. The safety and integrity of the household depended on her ability to reveal the truth without causing unnecessary alarm. She continued her duties late into the evening, cleaning, arranging, and observing. Every sound, gesture, and action was cataloged in her mind. She noted the pauses in conversations, the hesitations in movement, and the subtle cues in facial expressions. These details were often invisible to the casual observer, but she understood their meaning. Her work was not just about maintaining the mansion. It was about understanding the hidden dynamics that could affect safety and trust. The following morning, she prepared herself for a crucial conversation. She had collected weeks of observations, patterns, and evidence that pointed to irregularities in behavior, manipulation, and potential threats. Her plan was to share these findings with the billionaire in a clear, step-by-step manner, revealing the full picture without exaggeration or fear. She knew that the right timing and calm explanation would be key to ensuring that her observations were taken seriously. When the billionaire entered the study, she waited quietly until he had finished a call, then began to speak. Her voice was calm, her tone neutral, but firm. She described the unusual behaviors, the irregular patterns, the subtle manipulations, and the evidence she had found. She connected the dots, explaining how seemingly minor details formed a coherent picture that could not be ignored. Every observation was presented carefully, with context, so that he could understand the full significance of what she had noticed. At first, the billionaire was surprised. He had never expected the quiet housekeeper, who had always moved silently through the mansion, to have gathered such detailed and important information. But as she continued, presenting her findings logically and clearly, he realized that her observations were accurate and invaluable. The patterns, anomalies, and evidence she described confirmed suspicions he had not fully understood. Her vigilance and insight had uncovered truths that no one else had seen. Together, they reviewed the evidence in detail. The documents, notes, and patterns she had observed were connected to reveal an ongoing effort to manipulate circumstances within the household and beyond. Thanks to her patience and careful observation, the billionaire was able to understand the scope of the situation and take action before any harm could occur. The housekeeper's quiet work had prevented potential losses, disruptions, and risks that could have been far more serious. Her role, though understated, was acknowledged in a way that did not alter her humility. She had acted with intelligence, patience, and care, revealing what no one else could see. The billionaire respected her discretion and insight, understanding that her ability to observe, analyze, and connect details had made the difference between potential danger and safety. She had saved him not through confrontation, but through careful attention and quiet action. The mansion resumed its usual rhythm, but now there was a subtle shift. The billionaire was more aware of his environment, more cautious in decision-making, and more observant of small signs that could indicate problems. The staff, though unaware of the full story, began to notice her careful attention to detail. The housekeeper continued her work, maintaining order and cleanliness, but also maintaining the vigilance that had proven essential to safety. Her presence, though quiet, had become a source of stability and security. Days turned into weeks, and life in the mansion moved forward. The housekeeper remained focused on her duties, quietly observing, noting irregularities, and understanding patterns. Visitors came and went, staff continued their routines, and the billionaire continued his work with a new level of awareness. The mansion was safer, more controlled, and more attentive to hidden details. Thanks to the silent guardian, who noticed what others did not, her story, though largely unknown outside the walls of the mansion, left a lasting impact. The housekeeper's quiet vigilance had revealed hidden threats, prevented harm, and demonstrated the power of careful observation and intelligence. The billionaire never forgot her contribution, understanding that her work was not about recognition, but about awareness and protection. Her example became a quiet reminder that some of the most significant actions are those performed silently, with patience and insight. And so, the mansion continued its life, filled with activity yet under the watchful eye of the housekeeper. She moved through the halls with calm precision, performing her duties and observing the subtle cues that others overlooked. Her vigilance ensured that the household remained safe, secure, and prepared. The quiet heroism of her work, unnoticed by most, had shaped the safety and awareness of everyone within the mansion. Her patience, intelligence, and careful observation had made her an invisible force, guarding the household and the billionaire with insight that no one else could match.